Negative K, nothing further, just...
This is the case of Sir Richard Sutton. With a net worth of over £301 million and a staggering property empire totalling over 7,000 acres of land, hotelier Richard Sutton's domain was larger than the country's Ministry of Defence. But who exactly is Sir Richard Sutton? And following a lifetime of fortune, what hideous intent waited for him in his final moments? My name is Adrian, and welcome back to another video by Coffeehouse Crime. They say that you cannot trust anyone like your own family, but this case will tell us otherwise. And honestly, I'm still struggling to believe this story is real. By the way, I post solved, unsolved and strange cases here on a weekly basis, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing to Coffeehouse Crime. So pull up a seat, grab a coffee and sit back. This is the case of Sir Richard Sutton. Today, we're back in England, and although our case will once again take us to the southeast, we begin this one in Lincolnshire. Situated towards the county's western border lies a small village named Brant Broughton, and in the year of 1937, Richard Sutton was born here. And although this town may be nothing more than a speck on the map, Richard's family roots were quite the opposite. He belonged to the Sutton baronetcy, a title that originates from the reign of King James I. And the long story short for this title, a baronet is ranked below a baron, but above all knights. In today's world that means almost nothing. But usually, baronetcy families are quite well off, given the small fortunes that they had in the centuries before them. And this is very apparent in today's case. Richard Sutton was actually Sir Richard Sutton IX, and his family was wealthy. Very wealthy. Richard always had the vision to become a lawyer. He wanted to put his time and career towards helping other people. But his choice in career didn't necessarily turn out that way, as instead he would eventually become a hotelier. Which, if it wasn't obvious, means that he owned and managed hotels. Richard was described by family and friends as a warm, compassionate and generous man. Marrying his first wife Fiamma in 1959, they went on to have 2 children together, David Sutton and Caroline Sutton. And as Richard matured through his adulthood, his extensive property and farming portfolio grew, as did his lucrative hotel empire. Many of Richard's hotels are symbolic to England's tourist industry. A night in a suite at the luxurious 5-star Sheraton Grand Park Lane, which is located in London's Piccadilly, can cost up to £1,500 per night. And Mayfair's iconic Athenaeum Hotel offers a 5-star experience in the heart of London, with a spa, sauna and steam room to go. By the new millennium, Richard was fast approaching a position in the top 500 wealthiest people in the United Kingdom. And although most of his money was inherited, this would put him right at the top of society. And I mean this kind of top. Expensive cars, private jets, holidays that one could only dream of. Richard had it all. However, there was one thing that Richard was not able to master. And unfortunately, that was his marriage. In the year 2002, both he and Fiamma decided to divorce. Richard may have been wealthy beyond comprehension, but he was not cold or heartless. He was actually devastated that his marriage fell apart. However, as with many corners in life, where one flower dies, another will bloom. And that's where Anne Schreiber enters the scene. Originally from Denmark, Anne was a physiotherapist, and she was married to her husband, David Schreiber. David came from a military background. He earned his time in the cavalry before becoming a business owner in London. The two lived in a heritage-protected farmhouse in the countryside of Dorset, along with their 3 children, 2 daughters, Louisa and Rose, and 1 son, Thomas. And living in Dorset, they lived close by to the Sutton family. It was around the same time of Richard's and Fiamma's downfall that Anne's marriage with David also started to fall apart. David was a charismatic and theatrical man, but behind his charm, he had a troubling history. Not necessarily an alcoholic, but David was a problem drinker. He was well known for drunkenly firing his guns outside of the farmhouse, and often threatened to end his own life. They did live a relatively happy life in the countryside, and there isn't much to highlight past David's antics. But little Thomas witnessed and understood the strain between Anne and his father. Nevertheless, Thomas loved him dearly, and he was devastated to see their marriage fall apart when he was only 16 years old. The Schreibers and the Suttons were already friends for several years, but following the fragmentation of both families, Thomas was surprised when his mother suggested to him that they should all move into Richard Sutton's mansion, without his father included. Thomas eventually figured it out, and when he did, he didn't hang about either. With his now broken family's newfound wealth, he decided to head to Denmark to go to college, and after that, he headed to London to study music tech. It is here that Thomas's passion in becoming a DJ turned into an amateur reality. He started working at local gigs, collecting vinyl records, and swinging from job to job. And all in the meanwhile, things were going well for Richard and Anne too. They officially moved into their new estate named Moorhill Mansion, costing them a tidy sum of £1.4 million, and located in the affluent area of Higher Langham in Dorset. However, the now single David Schreiber's world was much more dire. His drinking habits had worsened after losing his wife to another man. Although Richard and Anne were now together, the two still tried their best to remain friends with David. At one point, Richard even offered a place for him to stay at Moorhill Mansion if he agreed to attend rehab. But feeling like the offer stepped too much over his own pride, David would ultimately refuse this. And in April of 2013, David unfortunately passed away, suffering from a chronic memory disorder caused by his alcoholic tendencies. These details are very important when in context to the series of events that occur in today's case, as after David's death, Thomas became enraged. He felt that his now stepfather Richard Sutton, and the rest of his own family for that matter, had not done enough to help save his father. While his sisters Louisa and Rose acclimatised relatively well to the shift in family dynamics, the transition wasn't so smooth for Thomas. And now that his father was dead, he saw the divorce and Richard as indirect causes. His hatred and jealousy deepened to the point that he could no longer be around Anne or Richard. So in 2016, Thomas moved to Australia with his girlfriend to pursue his dream as a music creator. While the sun, beaches and high quality of life were a pleasure, his career unfortunately wouldn't work out, and in late 2018, Thomas split up with his girlfriend. Giving up on the Australian dream, he moved back home to England in January 2019. With a failed career, failed relationship, and nowhere to go, Thomas swallowed his pride and moved back into Moorhill Mansion with Anne and Richard. The situation was only supposed to be for a few weeks while Tom got his life in order. He was now in his 30s, and the call to be independent was quite strong. But this short time transcended from weeks into months. By March, Thomas's mental health had plummeted. He signed up to see a licensed therapist for some professional advice. He was conclusively diagnosed with depression and alcoholism, both of which were exacerbated by feelings of abandonment and trauma experienced throughout former years. Thomas was a deeply hurt man, and although it arguably was not true, he inherently saw himself as the victim to all family feuds. He felt abandoned by his parents, and even worse, financially imprisoned by Richard Sutton. But this impression of financial imprisonment was anecdotal. Both Anne and Richard cared for him very much. I mean, sure, he was poorly tempered, but they did want the best for his future. Richard was also very generous to Thomas. In fact, after returning from Australia, he gave Thomas £100,000 to go towards his first home. And despite being the age of 32, Thomas also received an allowance of £1,000 a month, and this was in Richard's hopes of helping him become more independent. However, surprisingly, this wasn't enough for Thomas. Not only was he ungrateful towards Richard's money, but he also refused to help around the house. At this point in life, Richard was getting on. He was 82 years old, where even a simple task of mopping the floor would take great time and effort. But Thomas didn't care. He was even resentful that Richard wouldn't let him drive any of his expensive cars. Maybe this wouldn't have been a problem if Thomas wasn't always so drunk. And the trouble didn't stop there. No, it got worse. Throughout the year of 2019, Thomas became physically aggressive towards his family. It was during that summer that he punched his mother in the face after she said he was a drunk and a leech. just like his biological father. As 2019 drew to a close and the year 2020 began, the situation in Moor Hill Mansion was progressively getting worse. In what was initially supposed to be 5 weeks, had now turned into 9 months of Thomas freeloading off of Richard and Anne. And he was still very much at it with his alcohol abuse, negativity and violence too. Living with Thomas was unbearable. And then, 2020, as we all know, COVID lockdown happened.
Good evening. The coronavirus is the biggest threat this country has faced for decades, and this country is not alone. And so tonight, I want to update you on the latest steps we're taking to fight the disease and what you can do to help. From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
With the new pandemic gripping headlines across the world, people, particularly in the UK, were forced to stay indoors amid a national lockdown. This would have a profound impact on millions of people's mental health. For many, it meant losing their jobs and being stuck inside with nothing to do. Maybe even without any food. This was a stark contrast to the life of Thomas Schreiber, who was upset and frustrated that he was stuck inside a multi-million-pound mansion, with no financial obligations or bills to pay. Nevertheless, Thomas used lockdown as an excuse to pardon his increasingly erratic behaviour towards Anne and Richard. And as 5 weeks elongated from 9 months to 20, Sir Richard Sutton began to feel like a prisoner in his very own home. The straw that broke the camel's back began in November of 2020. I don't think you can get more upper class than this, but the family were arguing over the inheritance of a chandelier. The chandelier was destined to one of Thomas's sisters, and despite him not even owning a home, he wanted it. Feeling that he was again being treated unfairly and was the runt of the family, Thomas lost his temper. The situation turned violent, ending in the old man Richard himself striking Thomas over his back with his walking cane, the cane shattering as a result. To Thomas, this was beyond humiliating, and although he had previously punched his mother in the face, apparently Richard had gone too far. From this point onwards, Thomas would officially shut himself off from the rest of his family. I suppose they were lucky to live in a mansion big enough to avoid each other entirely. I don't think you'd get away with that in a normal-sized house. Nevertheless, Thomas saw this moment as rock bottom. He started to have very unsettling thoughts every day. He began to tell friends that he was going to one day get revenge on Richard and his mother, who he now nicknamed as the gold-digging bitch. He even admitted these plans and thoughts through voice recordings to his friends.
It's pretty bleak, it's pretty miserable. My mum's being an absolute and it's really toxic. She refuses to apologise for her horrible words the other day, and she refuses to make Richard apologise for assaulting me. You can imagine how that makes me feel. It's one rule for me and a different rule for everyone else, and it has been the case for 15 years. So I'm planning my revenge, and I'm also planning my departure with more focus on the latter. I can't go on feeling and being treated with prejudice. It's not right. So there's a lot of hate and upset feelings. Yeah, it's all to do with money. It's the root of all evil, and it's all to do with prejudice and denial. And it's a shame, but it's true.
Moving forward, Thomas continued to fantasize over taking his so-called revenge. He searched online for articles about revenge and betrayal, told friends that he was struggling to control his emotions, and even asked his girlfriend what she would do if he did something terrible to his parents. The situation in Moor Hill Mansion was clearly not getting any better. It was a situation that Sir Richard described as a prison, and Thomas described as a pressure cooker. But on the 7th of April 2021, a staggering 2 years since Thomas moved back into Moor Hill Mansion, any sanity that remained within those four walls would suddenly break. At 8:41 PM on the 7th of April 2021, armed police stormed the property of Moor Hill Mansion. A member of the public had called 911 after becoming highly concerned for Richard and Anne. Breaking through the glass of its conservatory doors, they tactically entered from the back of the building. And what they found inside was haunting.
Right, my room.
Right, someone with me! From me, advance smoke to the front, advance smoke to the front, cover on right! Yeah, got it. Got it.
Officers found Anne in the kitchen, but barely alive. She had suffered 15 knife injuries, including injuries to her arms, chest, neck, shoulders, the back of her head, and her back, which included a partially severed spinal cord. With the amount of blood lost and injuries taken, police initially thought that she had been shot with a shotgun, and due to her injuries, she was only able to respond to officers through blinking. Bloody boot prints created a trail leading upstairs, where officers found Sir Richard on the floor. He had managed to escape from the kitchen, but only made it this far, because sadly, he had died from his many injuries. The attacker's knife had pierced his heart. Police would also find Richard's walking stick in the kitchen and broken, where he had desperately tried to save Anne from the attacker. Detectives would soon realise that Richard's Range Rover was missing from the garage, and Thomas Schreiber was also missing in action. With that said, he very quickly became their prime suspect. These suspicions were reinforced very quickly too, as soon after realising the Range Rover was gone, family and friends started receiving very concerning voice messages from Thomas. If it isn't obvious, Thomas indeed was the killer. Thomas did indeed steal the Range Rover, and he was now on the run, frantically heading towards London while rambling through voice messages.
Josh, I'm so sorry. I've made a mistake, and I let my emotions get the better of me. This is the last you'll ever hear from me. I love you dearly. You're the best person I've ever met, and you're a fine gentleman. I've made a mistake. I've let my anger get the best of me, and I've killed my mother, and I've killed her partner, and this is the last you'll ever hear from me, and I'm so sorry. I can't stop the hatred, and it's has become too much, the denial and the deceit and the lies. I had to take action. Adam, I love you dearly. I'm so sorry for what I've done. I love you dearly. I'm going to die now. And I hope you understand why that is. It's over for me now, and it's over for my mum, and it's over for Richard. God bless you. I love you, and rest in peace. Rose, I love you. I'm sorry for what I've done. You're a fantastic sister, even though you're a liar and a gold digger, just like your mother. I'm so sorry for my mistakes. But the lies and the consistent lies have become too much. And basically, I want you to be happy, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry because I couldn't take the lies anymore, and I couldn't take the hatred anymore. Bye.
After being clocked on the A303, Thomas eventually led police on a high-speed chase towards and throughout London. In fact, he was captured speeding across 5 counties. Thomas was witnessed reaching speeds of up to 135 miles per hour through central London, even driving on the wrong side of the road, putting other members of the public at severe risk. After a couple failed pit maneuvers, police eventually stopped Thomas by T-boning his vehicle, and officers were pissed. Upon coming to a halt, Thomas immediately pulled out a knife and plunged it into his chest several times. But police were not going to allow him to die right there, so in response they pulled out a taser and, well, tasered him. And after failing to take his own life, Thomas replied with, "Just kill me. I pay your wages, I ask you to kill me." Thomas was immediately taken to the hospital, where soon after he made a full recovery. And within 60 minutes of being discharged, he found himself at the back of a prison cell. His trial would finally begin on the 3rd of December 2021, where he endured 3 long weeks on the bench, facing the jury and his family. While on trial, he pleaded guilty to a lesser violation of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility due to an abnormality of mental function. Thomas also claimed that he was overcome by demons during an alcohol-fueled madness, and that a voice in his head told him to attack, when all he actually wanted to do was hug his mum. And bad news for Thomas, but good news for everyone else, but Anne Schreiber had miraculously survived the attack, and she was therefore a key witness in his trial. Dialing in via video link to provide evidence and her side of the story, Anne describes how she still suffers nightmares over her son's attack, which, unfortunately, has left her almost completely paralysed. Her spinal cord was partially severed, meaning almost all movement below her neck is now no longer possible. So, what really happened on the night of the 7th of April? What catalysed this brutal attack? Well, Thomas claims psychosis. Apparently, after an argument with Richard, he snapped. Thomas bottled Sir Richard over the head with a glass whiskey decanter, before storming into the kitchen to viciously attack his own mother. And even after being bottled, Richard stepped in to try and save his wife. But being severely wounded, he then fled upstairs, where he was attacked once again. And when it was all over, Thomas made several voice messages before climbing into Richard's Range Rover and hastily making his way to London. While en route, he dropped 30 grand into his girlfriend's bank account, confessed to her, and then pleaded her to meet him. But thankfully, she called the police instead. Questions around Thomas's mental health did of course come up during his trial. Family had previously debated if maybe his premature birth could have caused some sort of lasting damage, as apparently when he was born, he was so small that he could fit into the palm of David's hand. While it's still not clear, research does suggest that premature birth can cause additional risk towards developing mental health conditions, such as schizophrenia, depression, and bipolar disorder. Thomas was also very keen to highlight that, if it wasn't for COVID, this vicious attack definitely wouldn't have happened. So, I guess he's trying to blame COVID for his actions now. Either way, it only took the jury 4 hours and 51 minutes to come to their verdict. And on the 17th of December 2021, by a vote of 11-1, Thomas Schreiber was found guilty for the murder of Sir Richard Sutton, and guilty for the attempted murder of his mother, Anne Schreiber. The judge commented that Thomas's actions had caused utter devastation to the Sutton and Schreiber families. He treated Sir Richard's house and possessions as if they were his own, showed neither Richard or Anne any respect, and displayed a breathtaking sense of entitlement which at times left Sir Richard feeling like a prisoner in his own home. Thomas was officially handed a life sentence, with the possibility of parole only after 36 years. And, no surprise, he has already appealed his conviction. Following Thomas's trial, the family of Sir Richard Sutton also released a statement. In it, they said,
"How could any family recover from such a sudden and devastating loss? We can never bring back Sir Richard, but his spirit will very much live on, alongside the very happy memories we have of our incredible father, brother, and grandfather. His values of being warm, generous, and compassionate to everyone he met will be carried forward by future generations to come, and will never be extinguished."
When it comes to the future of the Sutton baronetcy, Sir Richard Sutton's son, Sir David Robert Sutton, is set to claim its title once he proves his entitlement to it. Unfortunately, Richard's death will leave a long and tragic shadow on the family. And as for Moorhill Mansion, the building remains in the Sutton baronetcy's possession. It is unclear if they will keep or sell the property, but depending on if you're superstitious or not, it may now just come with an additional tenant. There is not much more to say about Thomas Schreiber, but my guess is that the only legacy he will leave is the impression of being a selfish and ungrateful man-child. And that just about wraps up today's case. Thank you so much for watching another video today by Coffeehouse Crime. If you found this video interesting, or you learned something new today, then please remember to like the video and subscribe if you haven't yet. And what are your thoughts about Thomas Schreiber? Time and time again we're reminded about the psychology behind a killer, and what form of manual intervention could have prevented a murder. Could anything have been done to stop Thomas Schreiber? Please share your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you again for watching, folks, and I'll see you again real soon in the next one. Until that moment arrives though, look after each other. Goodbye.